continuing to serve serving this country, as well as serving in support of me. I mentioned that because I do want to talk more about it another time, but I mentioned that because it got me to thinking about what this is all about, what we're doing. Now, for those few people at home watching on C-SPAN, I'm here alone, mostly in the chamber, with the exception of the speaker, my friend from California. And I think about Rebecca, and I think about all of those young Americans out there working hard every day, trying to get someone elected or go fight for what they believe in. And that's what this is about. This is the people's house. This is the House of Representatives. It's really an unbelievable institution when you think about it, what it meant in the history of the world. I was at Independence Hall on July 2nd. I went up there because I wanted to be up there when I was watching so many of our monuments and so many of our statues under attack. And it's not the marble, it's not the mortar, it's not the bricks that matter. It was the ideals represented there. So I went up to Independence Hall, and it was on July 2nd, which many will know was the day that we separated from the crown, the day of the actual vote. And the folks there were very kind to me. They were closed down because of what we're dealing with the virus. They were very kind, though, and allowed me to go into Independence Hall. So I had the great blessing of being in Independence Hall on July 2nd, 244 years to the day of the vote. And then I got to go over to the other room, which is a different room, where the first 5 Congresses of the United States met. And that, of course, we have a history of then moving on to different capitals. We ended up here. And we've been in this chamber for, I don't know the history as well as I should, but 100 years or something in this chamber. And this people's house, in my opinion, is failing the people of the United States. I'm going to say that again. The people's house, the 435 representatives that make up this half of Congress, 1/2 of 1/3 of the federal government, is failing the American people. It is failing the American people because we literally never debate. We literally never offer amendments and have any debate here on this floor. We are ruled by a handful of folks who make rooms in back chambers, drop bills on the floor of the House, and then demand we come down and vote on them. And by the way, that is both Democrats and Republicans. The people's house is supposed to be the people's house. We are supposed to actually debate, engage. You want to know why things are so broken? It's because if you even dare think about offering an amendment to a bill, you got to go to some rules committee to get blessed to be able to even have the ability to offer it. You'll get shut down in rules committee, and then there's never any debate. What kind of a people's house is that? I would posit that it is not one. We have so many issues right now that is tearing our country apart, that are tearing our country apart. Why? Because there is no leadership coming from the representatives sent to Washington to represent the people. None. If there were leadership, we would have actual debate. We would actually sit down here and come up with ideas and offer solutions and then hammer them out. We'd actually sit down at a table like a small business, or sit down at a table like a family and balance a budget. We would have a debate about the proper policies to deal with a pandemic instead of pointing fingers and politicizing a virus. In what universe do you politicize a virus? Yet that is precisely what the leaders of this great and august country have done. Everyone in America is sitting around wondering what on earth has happened that we are now deciding how we make policy based on polls and reactions to whatever the president says or whatever the Speaker Pelosi says. It's absolutely amazing. The needle moved when President Trump said that we ought to open our schools. Simple notion. Let's open up our schools. Why might that be important? I don't know. How about for all the working class Americans who can't afford daycare and are trying to figure out how to have their children get educated? Why aren't we having a robust debate about that instead of just pointing fingers and saying, oh, be afraid? But that's what we're doing. But it's really easy for all the latte drinking, Peloton riding, Volvo driving, white Americans to run around going off and saying, I'm going to go by and get my little drink, but somebody's serving me. And those people serving me, how are they going to have their kids get educated? It ain't going to be if we don't open our schools. Can I tell you what they're doing in Austin, Texas? This is how genius it is in Austin, Texas. They're saying we can't open our schools till late September or some undetermined date. Oh, but don't worry. We'll open the buildings, allow the YMCA to go in, hold a group forum there to watch virtual education, which now, by the way, I'm seeing all sorts of stories of teachers saying, well, we don't want to do the virtual education either. What are we doing for our children? Why are we debating this right now instead of having, oh, President Trump said we should open our schools, so we're going to have a 20% swing in how we view opening our schools? In what universe does that statement by the president change what we should be doing as the people's house about opening our schools? Yet that is precisely what happened. We have a current environment in the United States of America where the very rule of law, which attracts people from all over the world to come here, is being trampled upon by people, frankly, often self-identifying as Marxists, but people who are ravaging cities, literally undermining the health, security, safety, community of our cities, our states, our homes. Federal courthouse being targeted and burned in Portland. Now, what happens? Again, it becomes politicized. In what universe is that political? I mean, I would suggest to anybody, go look at anything I've ever said about federalism or about respecting states and respecting local powers to make decisions that are best for the people. But there's another point to all of this, right? Which is the Constitution talks about securing the blessings of liberty. It talks about what we're supposed to do as a nation in terms of defending the rule of law. Of course, the federal government should defend the federal courthouse in Portland. To say otherwise is patently absurd. And yet, what did my Democratic colleagues do this week? What did they do when the Attorney General of the United States was here before the House Judiciary Committee, but sit there and talk over him and mock him and relentlessly stand on the side of lawless Marxists who are trying to destroy a city of the United States of America instead of standing up alongside our law enforcement? And what are we doing? What are we doing as a country? An empty chamber with 3 votes today at 6:30 tonight, or 2 votes tomorrow, or 3 votes tomorrow, and then head home. And then what? Be gone for August? While our businesses burn, literally and figuratively? While millions of Americans don't have jobs? Why are we going to adjourn? Why have we only met something like 15 out of the last 100 days or whatever it's been? It is an absolute embarrassment what has become of the people's house. We should be ashamed. We should be ashamed that we are not here doing the work of the American people. More importantly, we should be ashamed that when we are here, we are not sitting down at a table and working through the issues of the day based on the rule of law, based on the Constitution, based on the Declaration, based on our job as representatives to represent the people of the United States. Our police officers stand up to defend the rule of law. People come from all over the globe here. Why? Is it for what was enumerated in the Bill of Rights? Is it for what was enumerated or laid out in the Declaration of Independence? Those unalienable rights? Yes, it is all of those things, and it is equal justice under the law. All of the things that we should be fighting to strive to reach those ideals that, by the way, we will never reach because we are flawed men and women. My faith teaches me that. But they are the ideals we will constantly strive to reach. It is why when I went to Independence Hall, I was proud to stand up and say this is a great thing that happened here. I will never back away from defending the United States of America. I stopped off where Francis Scott Key wrote our national anthem. And I did a video there. I'm not going to back away from defending our national anthem and defending our history. I went from there to the Jefferson Memorial. I went to the Roosevelt Monument. I went to the Lincoln Memorial 2 days ago, I took my 10-year-old son and my 9-year-old daughter to Mount Vernon so they could see the home of the father of our country, George Washington, where I unapologetically taught my children about the greatness of our first president. It is important, that part. Unapologetically taught my children about the greatness of our country and of the father of our country. We are all flawed. We always will be, because we are men and women. We are made in the image of God, but we are not God. And thank the Lord that he sent his son so that I might have eternal life because I am flawed. But we should not look at our country with shame or disregard because we've made mistakes. Yet the other side of the aisle seems hell-bent on tearing down this great country, brick by brick, statue by statue, thread by thread of our flag, word by word of our anthem. It's a mockery of this house. How on earth can you explain to a veteran who's missing limbs, who bled in the Middle East or bled at Normandy or bled in the Pacific? How can you explain to a veteran that our country is bad? Our country is not bad. Our country is great. Our country has done more for more men and more women than any other nation in the history of the world. I'll debate that anywhere, anytime, with anyone who cares to actually have a debate in this so-called people's house. I will not sit here and listen to supposed representatives of this country tear her down. Right now, we've got people who are hurting because of the virus. People who are hurting because they've lost jobs. People who are hurting because their businesses have gone out of business. People who are hurting because streets have been torn down or burned because we've allowed looting to occur in the false name of social justice. What are we doing for them? Adjourning? Heading home to campaign so that people can score political points? I've had people on my own side of the aisle say perhaps I shouldn't do bills or work with certain members on the other side of the aisle. Why? Because they don't want us to avoid the ability to score political points. I know that's happened on the other side of the aisle. How do I know that? Because Dean Phillips, a very good man, and I worked together to get past the PPP Flexibility Act. And Dean, to his great credit, because he's a gentleman, deferred to me to introduce the bill because we had been working on the legislative part and he was working on the political part. We were working together. So I introduced the bill. We worked to get to an agreement. It was going to move through this chamber. But it couldn't be in the name of the Republican freshman from Texas, who, by the way, is in a district that might be on the hot list for the DCCC. Coincidence? That they then took the same language and dropped it into another bill with my friend from Minnesota, no fault of his own, and put it under his name and then said, great, let's move it through. And it passed 417-1. Yes, Congressman Massey, I'm looking at you with a little bit of love. Why? This is what the American people are sick and tired of. They're literally just sick of it. We can disagree, and we're going to disagree. Dean and I disagree. The Speaker and I disagree on issues. But we also agree. I was proud to join the Speaker in January, along with Dean and another Democrat. 3 Republicans and an independent. You can guess who the independent was. Why? To write an op-ed in the Washington Post saying, hold on here. Maybe we should rethink 20-year-old authorizations of force. Now, do I have all the answers to what we should do in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Iran? I do not. It's okay to say that, by the way. It's okay to say you don't have all the answers. But we got together to say maybe, just maybe, we should rethink 20-year-old authorizations of force when there are men and women who are now enlisting who weren't alive when we passed them. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a 12-tour veteran, I think a Marine, who killed himself. 12 tours, ladies and gentlemen. What are we doing? Why aren't we having a debate about that? And with all due respect to some of my friends on this side of the aisle, endless wars is not an answer. Neither is allowing bad actors to run amok around the world against our national security interests or that of our allies. So why must it always be, when we get to budget time, well, we got to have more money, we're going to keep defense, we're going to keep things going, we're going to have OCO, we're going to do this, we're going to spend more money, keep the wars going, whatever DOD wants. And why is it on the other side of the aisle too often? Well, endless amount of dollars for non-defense discretionary spending, but whatever, we don't care about $26 trillion of debt. Let's just pass a bill. Let's just get it done so we can do something. And you get what you want, you get what you want, we spend another extra $1 trillion. By the way, $1 trillion sounds kind of quaint, doesn't the gentleman from Arizona? $1 trillion sounds kind of quaint now. I don't even know where we are. Does anybody in this chamber have the first clue what our national deficit is going to be this year? No. We don't have a clue. Because we are spending money hand over fist. Why? Because we're trying to deal with a pandemic that, frankly, our own public actions and public governments are causing a hell of a lot of the very damage we're trying to bail out. State and local governments taking actions, which basically are tantamount to takings, shutting down people's livelihoods. And then they just walk away and shake their hands and they go, well, I guess the federal government will bail them out. Governors, mayors, sorry, bars shut down. Sorry, restaurants shut down. Sorry, barbershop shut down. Sorry, live music venue shut down. Sorry, artist who has to sing in the live music venue, you're shut down. Sorry, churches, you can't worship. Madam Speaker, I'm sitting here in this chamber wondering what it's going to take for the House of Representatives to actually represent. We don't govern. That's not what we do in America. We represent. We each represent whatever we represent, 700, 800,000 people, depending on the district. And we're here to share their values and beliefs and reach to some point of actual responsible leadership and do our job. But I got to say something here. The President of the United States, he draws a lot of fire. The President of the United States ran in 2016 on what? Build the wall, drain the swamp. And what does drain the swamp mean? I would tell you that whatever you think of the president, drain the swamp means everything I'm just talking about and 1,000 other things that are irritating the American people every single day about why this government, and particularly this Congress, can't do its job. Why bureaucrats stand in the way of what the people want. Why judges make up the law. Why Congress can't balance a budget. That's the swamp. The swamp represents the frustration of an American people who, while extremely willing to have people come to this country with open arms, also want their border to be secure. They don't want cartels running the border. They don't want 900,000 people coming to our border, being apprehended and having to deal with it. They don't want cartels to abuse women and children on the journey. They don't want fentanyl pouring across our border, and that's the state of our border. And the President of the United States dared to say we should have a secure border, and what happened? Colleagues on the other side of the aisle went to the border and lied about the state of the border with respect to kids in cages and kids drinking out of toilets. I went there. My chief of staff went down there the week after. Claims were made about kids drinking out of toilets, and they were toilets that have water fountains attached to them. But this is the hyperbole that drives public opinion and gets out in social media and undermines the one thing that almost all Americans understand is critically important, and that is to have border security where cartels don't run our border. That is not a controversial statement. But by the way, it's not just my colleagues on the other side of the aisle. There's a whole lot of people on my side of the aisle who love to sit there at the Rio Grande and have a little sign that says no trespassing. And then they wink, wink, nod, nod, and they over here they have a help wanted sign. How about we have an honest conversation about what a secure border looks like? Why don't we sit down at a table and actually do that? I'm sick and tired of Republicans who 10 years ago were saying to those of us who thought we should have a secure border because we knew what was happening and we saw what the cartels were doing and we saw the horrors of human trafficking and we saw the dead bodies in deserts. And people in our own party were saying, well, fences are a 19th century solution to a 21st century problem. And now because it's a politically charged thing, the president's for it and it's become partisan and said, well, yeah, we're all for it. When are we going to do our job, Republicans and Democrats, to do that? Secure the border of the United States. Not because we don't want to welcome immigrants, but because it's the responsible thing for a government to do. Why would we let the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel run the border in the Rio Grande Valley? But that is precisely what we're doing. Why would we allow fentanyl to pour across the border? Why would we allow addicts in our country to have a constant supply coming through from Mexico across our border through Texas, through Arizona, through New Mexico, through California? Why would we do that? It defies all rationality. It makes no sense. Yet that's what we do. And the American people are sick and tired of it. And giving credit where it's due, the President of the United States has tried to attack that problem. And he has met resistance from the swamp at every turn. He's met resistance from my Democratic colleagues, met resistance from bureaucrats at DHS, met resistance from bureaucrats throughout the administration when he's trying to do what the American people elected him to do. When we stand up saying we should defend the rule of law and stand beside law enforcement, what happens? The swamp pushes back. It says, no, we can't do that. Heaven forbid we have federal law enforcement protecting a federal courthouse. Who would have thought? The swamp pushes back. Right now we're facing the struggles that we're dealing with respect to the pandemic. I suspect that my friend from Arizona is here to talk a little bit about data about that. I could be wrong. I think I'm right. There's a lot of stuff that we should be looking at about this virus. It's a virus. It's not something you bottle up into a Tupperware container and put on the shelf. It's a virus. It's out. It's among us. It's in all 50 states. It's in every city and town. It's a virus. What are we going to do as a country to work through it? Cower in fear? Be afraid to actually look at the data? Be afraid to actually talk to doctors who might have an opposing or different view than the powers that be at the CDC or the NIH? Let me be clear. I don't know Dr. Fauci other than having interacted with him in a hearing or a setting like this. I don't know Dr. Birx other than similarly engaging as an official. But they're not the president. They're not an elected member of Congress. They're not an elected member of the Senate. Why are we having hearings with alternative, different views from other health professionals, other doctors? There is a large number of doctors, not insignificant, with differing opinions. Ioannidis at Stanford University, Scott Atlas at Stanford, Oxford put out recent reports. Dr. Risch at Yale talking about the possible efficacy and success with HCQ, with the hydroxychloroquine. I'm not a doctor. I don't know whether HCQ works, but I'd like to know, and I'd like to have the right to try. Why is it in the United States of America, a supposedly free country, a doctor cannot prescribe HCQ in certain circumstances? Or why are states preventing that? Or why are doctors at the CDC or NIH preventing that? When there's evidence, studies to the contrary. When it's sold off the shelf or in other countries around the world because it's a malaria medicine. Why would we not have a debate about that? You have doctors going across the street at the Supreme Court of the United States doing a press conference. I don't know them, but they're doctors, MDs, and they give a press conference saying how they think HCQ works as a prophylactic. What happens? It's censored by big tech, shut down as being potentially misleading. Does that not concern my colleagues on the other side of the aisle? That's a genuine question that I'd actually like to know the answer to. But I won't know because the 200 and some odd colleagues are out doing whatever they're doing right now, getting a dinner, doing their thing, coming home, they'll come in tomorrow, we'll rush in here, we'll have 3 votes. We'll never actually debate it. Will we? We will not actually debate it. Instead, everybody will go to Twitter, everybody will go do press conferences. People will point, they'll call doctors crazy, they'll say it's no good, and we'll never know. Or we won't know unless we fight through it to try to figure it out ourselves, not doing the hard work of this body to figure out whether HCQ is a good prophylactic or not. Again, I'm not advocating for it. I'm advocating for it's unbelievable to have to say this. I'm advocating for actually investigating it, debating it, finding the truth, and not censoring it. But that's what's happening. Why are we always saying how bad we're doing as a country right now? For longest time, we're not testing, we're not testing, we're not testing. We've done over 50 million tests. Are they the right tests? Are we testing the right way? Maybe we should have a good, robust debate about that. But we've had over 50 million tests. We're testing at a rate only surpassed by, I think, 3 other countries. I think we're 4th. Could be wrong. I think that's right. No, the rate, the testing, we're 4th. But we have 50 million tests, more than any other country in the world. We're testing by the thousands in Texas. Now, all the eyes have been recently on Florida and Texas and Arizona. And again, I'm sure my friend from Arizona will have some data on this, but these states, which have had, yes, an increase in the last several weeks, tragically, we're concerned, we're watching it, our governor's all over it, we're paying attention to it, but it's become a political football. And the total numbers in all of those states still pale in comparison to New York and New Jersey in terms of fatalities. And I have no real interest in sitting here and pointing fingers at the Democratic governor of New York or the mayor of New York, talking about how they failed versus how we succeeded or not succeeded or whatever. Why are we doing that? Why aren't we just sitting down together and working together to try to figure out what the right policies are? Dare I talk about masks? Am I allowed to talk about masks? It's a genuine question. Am I actually allowed to talk about masks? If the Speaker of the House of Representatives said, by the way, putting aside our constitutional duty to represent our constituents and vote on the floor of this House, that somehow that is a breach of decorum, And oh, by the way, I'm sure all the 12 viewers of this, when they take their viewers, my opponent will all say, oh, he's an anti-masker. Had this mask since April. My wife's soda HEPA filter in here. It's a real good mask. Not one of those like flimsy little cotton masks that were, by the way, made fun or said were inadequate by the NIH 5 years ago in a study. Yet if we go around, as long as you virtue signal that you're wearing a cotton mask, everybody says, aren't you really important? Aren't you just loving your country? Are we doing what we're supposed to do to actually make our country safer? Does anybody here know for certainty? Does anybody know when I'm sitting on an airplane and the guy 2 rows over has a cotton mask kind of dangling down? It's just sitting there and oh, the flight attendant says, good job, got your mask on. Is that making me safer? How about when you wear an N95 mask with one of those little valves? Have we finally gotten around to the side of saying, oh no, we all raced to get those, but no, you got the valve, it's kicking too much air out and that's going to hurt people. Now, why am I saying all that? I'm not saying don't wear a mask. What I'm saying is, for the goodness sake, this isn't the gospel handed down as to what precisely is the right way to do it when our own Dr. Fauci was questioning masks a mere months ago, when our own NIH was questioning it, when there was report after report about it, when Denmark and Sweden and Finland and all these other countries in the Nordic countries aren't wearing masks. Oh no, he's talking about masks. He's an anti-masker. That's what it's all about now. Get on Twitter, bash somebody, they're a nutball. When are we going to look at the data and try to do the thing that we need to do to lead this country forward? Do we know what we're doing to children right now? Do we have any idea? Our own CDC director talking about the number of suicides outpacing the number of deaths from COVID. I love my 10-year-old son. I love my 9-year-old daughter. I would give my life for them at any given moment, but they're going back to school on August 20th. Because it's good for them. But there are so many children in this country who are not going to be going back to school because we have scared the bejesus out of the entire country. We're America. We cured polio. We put a man on the moon. We beat Nazi Germany. We beat Japan. And we're cowering in the corner about a virus. Let's look at the numbers. Let's protect the elderly. Let's protect the people in nursing homes. But for goodness sake, let's open our schools. And don't let teachers' unions hide behind a virus to pretend they don't want something else when they do. And we know they do. The President of the United States ought to call a hearing and bring in Scott Atlas and bring in Ioannidis and bring in Risch and bring in some of the Oxford folks and bring in other doctors to talk about the science. Let's have a full discussion about this. Let's show the American people they can go back to work. They can go back to school. They can do it safely. We're destroying our economy, the greatest economy in the history of the world. 45% of black businesses have gone out of business over the last 5 months. You want to talk about Black Lives Mattering? How about those 45% of businesses? I guess that doesn't look good on the mound for Major League Baseball, does it? I guess that doesn't fit on the back of a jersey for the NBA, does it? Doesn't fit on one of those cute little stickers that the NFL likes to put on their helmets so they can feel good about themselves as social justice warriors. Who cares about those families that are destroyed because the businesses are gone? But that's what we're doing by our own judgment, by our own decisions. And we should be ashamed. The people's house. Look at it. It's empty. I don't know who's running your C-SPAN cameras. Take a broad view. Show the American people the people's house in all its glory. Cycling in your representatives to come in like robots and vote and walk out and then vote and then walk out and spend all day voting but never actually debating or talking. And by the way, 20 or 30 or 40 of them are voting from boats, voting from their homes, using proxy voting. What's a proxy vote? Oh, I'm glad you asked. A proxy vote is when someone isn't actually doing their constitutional duty of voting here in this chamber. A proxy vote is someone sitting at home and telling another member to vote for them, delegating the undelegable. Our Constitution doesn't provide for that. In 1793, our founding fathers were fighting yellow fever. 5,000 people had died in Philadelphia out of 50,000, 10%. They found a way to meet. Washington, Madison, Jefferson, Adams, they were all debating, how can we do this? Adhering to the Constitution. Heaven forbid we adhere to the Constitution. We have a duty to be in this chamber. We have survived wars. We have survived other pandemics. And this stuff isn't foreign to me. My dad is a survivor of polio. It's real. He's got a tracheostomy. He walks with a limp. He can barely get around, but he's 77 years old and he's alive because his mom fought through being a single mom in West Texas after she lost my grandfather, who died of cancer when my dad was 7. And here's my grandmother finding out her son has polio in September of 1949. My dad comes home from the hospital to say goodbye to his dad, who he'd only known for 2 years because his dad had been in the Pacific Theater. And then my grandmother runs and becomes the first woman elected county clerk in Nolan County, Texas. Helps my dad, gets up at 4 in the morning, goes, does therapy. He was the first to go on to college. I'm the first to go on to graduate school, and here I am in Congress. It's the American story. It's the American story we ought to be proud to share, proud to push, proud to champion. But instead, we're sitting in here in an empty chamber, running people through, voting on things that likely have no chance of becoming law. In fact, we know these appropriations bills have no chance of becoming law. We know it. Yet we're showing the American people that we're, quote, doing something. If you want to know what the swamp is, it's that. It's a disease, ladies and gentlemen. Do something-itis. We got to show the people we're doing something when you're doing literally nothing. That's what this chamber's about. And it should be about something better and more and bigger. We can disagree violently about certain issues and policies, but why can't we come together to balance our budget? Why can't we come together to figure out how to fight a pandemic without politicizing it? Yet that's precisely what we're doing. I think it's 9 years ago last night. May I ask the speaker how much time I have left?
The gentleman has 14 minutes remaining.
The gentleman has 14 minutes remaining.
1-4?
1-4.
I thank the speaker. It was 9 years ago last night. I was in an emergency room in Austin, Texas. I had fluid on my lungs and I didn't know what was going on. Found out 2 days later, 3 days later, it was likely, and then turned out to be, stage 3 Hodgkin's lymphoma. It's kind of a curveball one gets when you've got a 4-month-old daughter and a 2-year-old son. Your wife's scared out of her mind. And, you know, I remember the prayers, I remember the calls, I remember all of it like it was yesterday. Can't believe it's been 9 years. Governor Perry, for whom I worked at the time, couldn't have been a better man or gentleman in trying to help us and get through it. I went down to MD Anderson. I did a trial drug that is now the standard of care. And I'm alive today because of that and because of the great doctor that I had at MD Anderson. And I remember when going through that, of course, you don't know what the outcome's going to be. You know, it wasn't until October. I remember being down there with my wife when we got the news that the cancer was clear. I had to finish treatment through January of 2012. And, you know, it changes your perspective. Now, everybody in this chamber has either personally dealt with something like that. I can't even imagine what my friend Andy Barr is going through and losing his lovely wife. I can't imagine what folks who have known Representative Lewis for decades are going through. I can't imagine what Chairman Nadler's been going through with his wife's battle with cancer. We go around the room, right? I mean, all of us deal with these kinds of things. But I will acknowledge that for me, I mean, that was intensely personal. Getting a cancer diagnosis at age, whatever I was at the time, 39. But the reason I bring it up here is because, you know, as I think through this virus right now, I mean, it's a virus. I know it's bad. I know it's scary. I know there are people who've lost loved ones. But our reaction to it it does not represent the greatness of this country, in my opinion. I don't mean that we're not testing enough or we're not getting enough announcements out about masks. I mean loved ones that are dying alone. Let me be perfectly clear that if any of my loved ones get this virus, they're not dying alone. No local judge, no local mayor, no local governor, no president, no member of this body is going to stop me from seeing my loved one. But that's because I'm stubborn. But we're forcing that environment on a lot of people who don't know how to fight a system. Why would we allow that to happen in America? Why? But that's what we're doing. Why would we do what we're doing to children? Out of fear. Again, I promised myself I would lay everything I have to defend and save this republic for my kids and my grandkids. And my now 10-year-old son and my now 9-year-old daughter who are with me here this week. But I would be doing them a disservice if I held them back from going to school. And I know all the arguments about they go to school and then the teachers and then they'll take it home to someone else. Y'all, if we look at the data, look at who's likely to get hit by this virus. We should be adults about this. We are leaders. We set the tone. Fear is not the tone we should be setting as a nation. Yet that's precisely what we're doing. We should not be letting loved ones die alone. We should not be doing what we're doing to children. And by the way, I talked about cancer. I was blessed that I got a diagnosis at stage 3. What if I'd been sick this year? What if it had gotten into my bones? Was stage 4? That's happening to Americans right now. Do we ever talk about that on the floor? Or does everybody run around talking about 150,000 dead Americans because it's the president's fault? Why aren't we talking about the suicide rates? Why aren't we talking about the opioid addiction? Why aren't we talking about the cancer screenings that aren't occurring? Why aren't we talking about the suicides? Veteran suicides that are increasing. People feeling alone, scarring our children. That is not what a great country does. And ladies and gentlemen, we are a great country and we should darn well start acting like it again. Let's debate on the floor here what we should be doing with our military abroad and authorizations of force. Let's secure the border of the United States and not allow the swamp to stand in the way of common sense. Let's stand up with law enforcement, secure our communities. Don't let people run over streets and burn down buildings. Let's stand up in the face of a virus. Let's say we're going to defeat it, and let's damn well defeat it. It's who we are as a people. It is in our DNA. It has been there since our founding. It has been there through all of the wars. It has been there through previous pandemics, and it is with us here now, if we'll just tap into it. This should not be partisan. I'll look at both directions when I say that. It should not be partisan. I cannot believe we're sitting here in an environment where we've allowed a virus to become partisan. But that is precisely what we've done. Now, Speaker, I'm not going to take up too much more time. I know that the gentleman from Arizona has been patiently waiting. I suspect I didn't even start to bring up my charts and talk about numbers because I can never do battle with the gentleman from Arizona when it comes to presenting that kind of information. I know he'll do it well. But I do know this. We're a great country that is doing great things right now to combat this virus. I do know that when my physician, when I asked him, a great man, Dr. Yunus, grew up in Damascus, Syria. I asked Dr. Yunus, I said, well, Doc, I'm stage 3. You know, I got a 4-month-old and a 2-year-old and a wife. I'm 39. What am I looking at? And Dr. Yunus looked at me and he said, I'm not going to give you a percentage. Later, he gave me one because I made him give me one. He said, I'm not going to give you a percentage. He said, for you, it's 0% or 100%. Choose 100%. When are we going to choose 100%? When are we as a body, when are we as the Senate, when are we in the White House, when are we together on a nonpartisan basis going to choose 100%? 100% behind this country, 100% for the rule of law, 100% standing alongside of our law enforcement, keeping our communities safe, 100% that we're going to have our kids go back to school, we're going to get back to work, we're going to lift our economy up, and we're going to prove that the 21st century is going to be the greatest century that this country has ever known, not because we're cowering in fear, but because we're facing these things head on. That's what 100% means. That's what being an American means. I thank the Speaker, and I will yield back.